Hello, everyone. My name is Paige. I'm at Deschutes Public Library, and this program is part of Deschutes Public Library's virtual content. Check out deschuteslibrary.org and our YouTube page for all of our other fun, free content. Okay, tonight's presenters are Jean Nelson-Dean. She has been the Public Affairs Officer for the Deschutes National Forest for the past 9 years. Jason Fisher is the Wilderness Specialist for the Deschutes National Forest. Lisa Macknick is the Recreation, Heritage, Lands, and Partnerships Staff Officer on the Deschutes National Forest. And Tim Schenk is the Wilderness Permit Administrator for both the Deschutes and the Willamette National Forests. I'm going to turn it over now to Jason Fisher to begin the program. Thank you to all of our panelists and to you, our attendees, for making tonight possible. Jason, take it away.
Thank you very much, Paige. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'm going to share my screen here and hopefully this will be flawless. So please be patient. Okay, so this presentation tonight is divided into two sections. I'm going to talk about the background of the permit system and the implementation of that. And Tim is going to talk about recreation.gov and how to get a permit. The combined total of this presentation is about 25 minutes long, and the rest of the time we have set aside for your questions and answers. So please be patient. If you're there at home, jot down some of the questions so you don't lose your train of thought. So a quick overview of what the presentation is going to be. First off, we're going to go over what is wilderness, why a permit system, when will the permit system be implemented, and how to get a permit. So first, what is wilderness? And this is a very important question because wilderness is not just a term that we use to describe wild places. Wilderness areas is a federal designation, and it can only be designated by an act of Congress. And it is the highest level of protection given to federal public land. The Wilderness Act was signed on September 3rd, 1964, and it created a national wilderness preservation system. Wilderness areas are managed by the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There's special rules and regulations, and travel is only by hiking or horses. There's nothing motorized or mechanized allowed within wilderness. That means no bikes, no helicopters, no drones, no chainsaws, no game carts, etc. So as you can see from the slide here, there is a quick definition of wilderness pulled directly from the Wilderness Act. And basically that states a wilderness, in contrast with those areas where man and his own works dominate the landscape, is hereby recognized as an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. So within the Wilderness Act, there is a stewardship mandate. And basically that says each agency administering any area designated as wilderness shall be responsible for preserving the wilderness character of the area. Wilderness character is actually defined in the Wilderness Act, and it has four main components: natural, undeveloped, untrammeled, and has outstanding opportunities for solitude or a primitive and unconfined type of recreation. Now, under the stewardship mandate, we are directed by law to protect these areas for current and future generations. It actually comes up twice in the Act. I have them here real quickly. It is hereby declared to be the policy of the Congress to secure for the American people of present and future generations the benefits of an enduring resource of wilderness. And again later, these shall be administered for the use and enjoyment of the American people in such a manner as will leave them unimpaired for future use and enjoyment as wilderness. We also need to acknowledge that we manage these areas for more than just people and recreation. We are also required to manage public land for wildlife, botany, water quality, threatened and endangered species, etc. The goal of the project. The goal is to sustain recreational use in the 5 Central Cascade wilderness areas while ensuring the wilderness character of these areas is protected for future generations. The environmental assessment analyzed 5 wilderness areas for potential permitting. Those 5 are north to south, Mount Jefferson, Mount Washington, Three Sisters, Waldo Lake, and Diamond Peak. After looking at historic use, current use patterns, and after listening to the public, only 3 of the 5 studied wilderness areas were actually included into the permit system. So what it came down to is we have Mount Jefferson, Mount Washington, and Three Sisters were included in the Central Cascades Wilderness Permit System. To achieve the goal of this project, we began an environmental analysis to look at wilderness impacts, use, and management strategies. We held multiple public meetings, hosted presentations, and had 2 formal public comment periods. A decision was signed in May of 2019, establishing a permit system for 3 of those 5 wilderness areas, like I went over in the previous slide. One of the most important questions that we get, that's a very relevant question, is what drove this need for change? And there were 4 main things. The first was our expected population growth. Second was rapidly increasing visitor use. The third was increasing resource damage. And then the last was increasing user conflict. This slide shows expected population growth in Deschutes and Lane counties. What I think is really significant about this slide is that not only will both sides grow in populations, but that Deschutes County will be growing closer and closer in population to the Eugene and Springfield area. Between population growth, tourism, and more people wanting to recreate outside, this has increased use at the local level and obviously translated into more use of our wild places. The Three Sisters Wilderness use increased 231% from 1991 to 2016. Now, not surprisingly, our popular trailheads have had dramatic increases in use as well. Green Lakes increased 249%, and Devil's Lake, which is the gateway to climbing South Sister, increased 459% from 1991 to 2016. There are also what I identified as sleeper trailheads. These are trailheads that experience significant increases in use, whether due to population growth, natural displacement, or social media. Six Lakes increased 329%, and Tam MacArthur Rim increased 878% from 1991 to 2016. To add some context to Tam MacArthur Rim, that place is not normally snow-free until July. It has enough parking for about 6 cars. There's no bathroom, and now receives almost 20,000 visitors annually, primarily during July and August. So this trailhead is basically getting almost as much use as Green Lakes, with none of the amenities that Green Lakes has at the trailhead. One of the main problems we were experiencing is resource damage. I have just some quick stats here from 2018 documenting the work of our wilderness rangers, AmeriCorps members, as well as our volunteers. In 2018, 559 fire rings were cleaned and naturalized. 663 structures were dismantled. When I say structures, I'm talking lean-tos, wind walls, even cabins. We packed out 1,590 pounds of trash. And then there's the kind of the glory part of the job that we like to joke about is exposed human waste. We buried 1,218 incidents of exposed human waste. So while we have that resource damage is happening, we also have what I consider to be cumulative resource damage. And when I talk about cumulative resource damage, I'm talking about campsite proliferation as well as social trails. Now, there was a campsite inventory that was completed in 2010 to 2012, and it documented over 4,000 campsites. Now, I want to acknowledge that is actually before the start of the surge that was happening in 2015 and 2016. So there are definitely more campsites out there now. Also, there's an extensive social trail network. When I talk about social trails, these are basically user-created trails. These were not built or constructed by the Forest Service. We do not maintain them, and they're just out there all over the ground. And they are a disturbance to both wildlife, botany, and other resources as well. An inventory was completed in 2016 and 2018, and we found over 300 miles of social trails that were identified and mapped. Now, all of these impacts obviously have a negative effect on the character of the wilderness, and these disturbances create an environment where we are not leaving these wilderness areas unimpaired for future generations. So we still have historic users out there, hikers, equestrians, hunters, but we are now seeing an increase in other users that we've never seen out there, or very rarely seen out there before. Trail runners, we have weddings going on, bachelor parties, illegal races, parties, raves. It's just a whole different set of folks that are out there using the wilderness areas that we have not had in the past. So what have we been doing? Before getting to this point of a permit system, we've been attempting to increase staffing, primarily through grants. We've been partnering with Friends of the Central Cascades Wilderness, which is a local volunteer wilderness stewardship group, to get work done on the ground. We started a volunteer program in 2016, and we hired a volunteer coordinator in 2019 to manage 4 Wilderness AmeriCorps members and over 100 volunteers. We've had existing regulations, designated campsites in some areas, campfire bans in some areas, camping and campfire setbacks. We had 2 limited entry areas on the Willamette, the Obsidian and Pamelia, but we are still not keeping up. So I'm going to move into the permit system now. And what I really want to note is that we wanted to design a permit system that we would want to use. And we really sought to encourage spontaneity and freedom. So the basic premise is that once you get your permit to enter from a specific trailhead, you can go wherever you want. We are not managing your trip for you. We're not planning it all out. It is an entry-based system. So wherever you enter from, you have the freedom and luxury to go wherever you want within that wilderness area. I additionally want to highlight that adaptive management is a key component to the plan. So we can change things that either we got wrong, we can adapt to unforeseen changes in use patterns due to displacement, social media, or other unanticipated events that we haven't thought about. So this is what it came down to, the Central Cascades Wilderness Permit System. The permit system begins the Friday before Memorial Day and ends the last Friday in September. Central Cascades Wilderness permits are required for day use on 19 of 79 trailheads in those 3 wilderness areas. Day use at other trailheads still requires the free self-issue permit that is obtained at the trailhead. Central Cascades wilderness permits are required for all overnight use in those 3 wilderness areas. From the last Friday in September until October 31st, a free self-issue permit is still required for day and overnight use. And again, it's not a big change. Those can all be obtained at all of the trailheads. They have been historically since 1991. For trailheads that currently require the display of a Northwest Forest Pass, having a Central Cascades wilderness permit does not eliminate that requirement. So we have some changes to the campfires and camping regulations. There is now an elevational campfire ban. There are no fires above 5,700 feet in Mount Jefferson, Mount Washington, or the Three Sisters. Now, while Diamond Peak was not included in the Central Cascades Wilderness Permit System, there are no fires above 6,000 feet in Diamond Peak. So that's the only change down there. Additionally, there are 4 sensitive lake basins where fires are prohibited. As far as camping, there is a continuation of the 4 designated sites locations, and those are Green Lakes, Moraine Lake, and North and South Matthew Lake, where you need to camp in designated sites. And then there are also camping setbacks at 6 sensitive areas. Now, there's some differences between day use and the overnight permits. First off, all permits are reserved through recreation.gov, and Tim will pick us up in a few minutes and kind of lead you through that. Day use permits require a $1 processing fee per person per day. Overnight permits require a $6 processing fee per trip, and a trip can cover up to 12 people for up to 14 days. So the deal is, if you're going in with your family of 4, if you go in for 1 night, or if you go in for 5 nights, it's still going to be $6 across the board. It's not a per day, it's a per trip fee. Now, there is a little bit of confusion here that I really want to make sure that I address. That for day use permits, it is set up for the number of people, and overnight permits are set up for group. Now, it's a little confusing, but there was a method to our madness here. Day use limit was set for number of people because we wanted to really maximize opportunities for people to visit. And if we went with groups, it may have reduced that possibility. The overnight limit was set for groups, as they tend to camp together, and we are managing for the number of appropriate campsites there on the ground in the wilderness areas. I acknowledge and I realize that was a lot of information to absorb in a short amount of time. You can find more information at the website that I think Paige will send out in an email. And also, you can just Google Central Cascades Wilderness Permits, and that's one of the first things that comes up, and that has all the information on our webpage there. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Tim Shank. He's going to talk about how to get a permit, and just a reminder that we will have plenty of time for question and answers when he is done presenting. Thanks for your time tonight. I really appreciate you coming here to learn more about the permit system. And Tim, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you, Jason, for getting us all those details necessary to understand why we are in this position. Like Jason said, I'm the permit administrator, so I'm going to be reviewing with you all on how this system works and how you can put it to use for you. So I want to echo just Jason's sentiments right now, just saying that I do appreciate you taking out this time. Many of us are on these screens for work, for school, helping your kids out. So I understand that, dedicating this time is very valuable, and we all suffer from screen fatigue. So do really appreciate you making the effort to be here to get the information and ask the questions. So keep those questions coming in the comments here. And did you check what Jason said? 300 miles of social trail within our wilderness areas. We just went to the Redwood Coast, and that's about 300 miles one way and took 5.5 hours in a car. So maybe just something to put into perspective there. Man, that was a kind of mind-blowing fact, taking that from Jason here. So let me get my screen up for you all here. So backup lives, some things that I want to get addressed right away here is that you may want to have a piece of paper to take some notes and a pen or writing utensil. Also, what you should know is that this system lives online. So it is facilitated through recreation.gov. You may have been familiar with some other sites, say in the Park Service, where the big push is, hey, it doesn't matter, I'm going to roll out of bed at 5 a.m. and show up at the Ranger District office and be there for them to open up at 8 and get the last minute stack of big paper permits in the back. We don't have those, and we're never going to have those. And systems that do have it, they're moving away from it. So we really want folks to understand how the system works. 21 million users already have recreation.gov accounts. So we want you to be able to see how it works, use it for yourself. You probably have an account already, being avid users and living here in Central Oregon, but it's going to help you to save time, be proficient, and get the best out of this experience. So again, taking advantage of the recreation.gov platform and to facilitate this permit process. So here's some of those nitty-gritty things. Our overnight use is split. 40% are going to be full season available on April 6th, starting 7 a.m. Pacific time. And then 60% will come open on a 7-day rolling window, with that week happening before the permit season starts on May 28th. So it's the last Friday of May through the last Friday in September again. Day use, because more folks are going to take advantage of that on that narrow 7-day window. It has 80% that's up front, with 20% being reservable full season. For overnight use, each site has a minimum of 1 that you can do advanced full season, and then 2 or more are going to be in that 7-day rolling window. Many trails have many more than that. Just showing you some minimums here. Day use, minimum reservable at the trailhead is 6. So we put that system wide. So that might explain why we had some of those fluctuations in percents that you saw earlier. So for example here, I wanted to highlight Todd Lake. Todd Lake does have a wilderness trail, but the lake itself, walking around there with your family like I do 2-3 times a year, take in the seasons, look for the frogs, look for the flowers, all that good stuff, does not require a permit. So this is only for that trail that tracks up onto the ridge over to the right. So when you enter into the wilderness boundary, it requires a permit. So 6 of those are available full season in advance. And then that rolling 7-day window adds another 6. So every single day, another 6 will come up. Another example of this, Duffy Lake has 30 total, but 20% of that is reservable way out in the season. Again, that's 6, but then that 7-day window, every 7 days, another 24 permits come open. So just trying to give you a little bit of understanding of the functionality of the rules we have in place. Here's some steps on how to make your experience fast and relatively painless. So you want to be logged in first. And if you aren't logged in, you need to make an account. And after this video, you need to go make your account if you haven't done so already, because there's a 2-step email login process. You have to verify your email. And you want to do that and put in all of your details right away, because it will help you out in the future when you want to be ready to go at 7 a.m. on the 6th. The phrase we're using is Central Cascades. That's going to help you narrow down to find our facility pages, as the tech IT speak goes in this world. And that's a lot easier than trying to say, type in Brighton Bush Trailhead, for example. It's going to help narrow things down a lot better when searching a national database. So know your trailhead that you want to have, the experience you're hoping to have out there, and the dates that you have available. So if maybe your option A or B isn't, you can find something that still works for you. And also know your group and party size to the best of your ability at that hand, just so you can boom, add those numbers in. If you're having dogs, or if you're on an overnight and you want to designate somebody as an alternate permit holder, you can do that as well for the leaders. Okay, and then checking out is pretty simple. You just are finalizing your details. And if you're using your phone, which you can do all this online on your smartphone, the app works for day use, not over right now. But just a regular web browser, you can do all this on your phone, and you can just scan your credit card and it's ready to go. So it's about a 2-minute process once you get the hang of it. So I'm going to be demonstrating some live feed here from a screenshot recording that I did, and the dates you'll see are from March 1st because this did occur in the past. Nothing is open or to be seen at this time. The system will open for visibility again, April 6th, 7 a.m. So this is a test environment, so some things will just be more bright with like flashy pictures and dates that are different. And yeah, that's my son at the saddle above No Name Lake, just so you know. Okay, so here comes that video. All right, so this is the recreation.gov home landing page. And if you can draw your attention to the upper right-hand corner, you will see the name Woodsy Owl. This is where you would either log in or sign up if you have not already done so. And if you're going to try to make a reservation, it'll prompt you to make an account if you don't have one already or logged in. So here we're searching Central Cascade. You get 3 returns for day use, full season overnight, and 7-day in advance. For this example, we're doing a day use permit, which you can filter by either the date or by the trailhead. I like filtering by date because it shows you the trailheads that actually still have availability for that date. So again, we're using March 1st here, and our example will be for the Devil's Lake trailhead. Okay, so you'll see bottom left shows the amount of quota that is available, 98. So you add your party group size to this, 2 adults and a child. So it builds your order. And if you have your details, like I said, already put into your account, it's going to import that straight to here. Saves you a lot of time and hassle. Here is our need to know facts. You will need to review them and check yes here because that will be part of your permit. And the rangers will ask you if you did actually read those details. Here, your shopping cart is just your final chance to review your details if you have any last minute changes. And it is held for 15 minutes. So once it's in your cart, that's yours. Okay. The checkout system, this is just how it works. Again, we're using Woodsy Owl's credit card here. He doesn't have the same funding bank as Smoky Bear's, so you can go ahead and write those numbers down, but you might get an error or a bounce message on that one, so I'm not sure how far you're going to go with that. Okay, so this is all happening as a real-time experience, and like I said, about 2 minutes, and here we are, boom. You've got a reservation, and you have your permits available, whether you want to save them, print them, or you can, again, use your smart device and you can show us the PDF file on your phone there. We got the QR codes for scanning and validation, as well as there are those need to know things that I mentioned you are agreeing to by clicking that yes box. Not a terribly difficult situation, as you can see, but we're going to briefly go over the overnight system. And this looks very familiar to you folks who have used Camellia, Obsidian, or made maybe a campsite reservation at one of the national forest sites and national park sites. So this is that landing page for the full season advance. Looks identical to the 7-day rolling window sales. Enter your date to check the availability. Because of the number of trailheads here, we do have it filtered by wilderness area in this case, so just a slight difference here. Again, we're going to go March 1st, looking at the Devil's Lake trailhead. And one thing to note here, if you're looking at this, your nights and dates will show up kind of like if you're staying at a hotel. Like if you're staying there Saturday night, you're checking out Sunday. So in this case, it shows that going to be there the night of the 7th and then checking out or leaving the 8th. So the maximum stay is 13 nights, 14 days. But you can do anything in there down to just 1 night. So we'll say you did this all April 6th, bright and early, and you're like, whew, I got it. I can rest, go to work, go to school, what have you, go back to bed maybe, I don't know. You want to come back, it's time to go on that hike. You'll go log into your account, look under my reservations. You've got those 2 you can see there, the Devil's Lake for the overnight, and then there's those day use tickets down below. So you can retrieve them or review your financial transaction or make edits if you need to. Word of warning though, if you are going to print your overnight permit, which you can do 2 weeks in advance, you want to make any changes like designating that alternate permit leader or changing your group size number. You want to do that before you make that print. You can also extend your trip if you have less than that 13 nights, if there are still additional nights of quota remaining. And this is a final plea from our end, is the cancel quota karma. So if you can't make it, please take literally, as you've just seen, 1 minute to cancel your reservations. There's no additional fees. I've heard rumors of other systems, other locations that charge you an additional fee on top of that. That is not the case. While you do not get a refund for doing this, you do open up that opportunity for another family, another person to go have that experience in the wilderness. And just as we've learned from some of the trials and tribulations of the Mount Bachelor system, you might want to find yourself on the other end of having that refreshing that morning of where you got the day off of work and you didn't expect it, or you got that babysitter and you can get out there and take advantage of that. So please, please, please call us, make that effort. It will pay off. So if you don't have a smartphone, don't have a computer, all those things, just don't like using that, there are other options here. So you can call the reservation line at recreation.gov. It is a national number, so you might have some wait times depending on when you call. They open at 10 a.m. on the Eastern, so that's why we have our 7 a.m. start time on this side. So please practice, get in there, get your accounts made. We will be doing our best with our offices being closed to help over the phone, but you'll want to learn this system, be able to manage it on your own so that you can be riding shotgun and making your permit reservations on the way up the hill. Okay, so that is the end of my portion here. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and we'll get on to the Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think we will now move into question and answers. There have been quite a few questions in the chat. I've answered some of those, but some are a little more complex. So I'm going to have Lisa answer some of those questions. So Lisa, the first question, I'm not going to get it exactly because it disappeared a little bit, but was about trailheads and day use permits. If people want to plan ahead and go with a group of people, and they all require a day use permit per person, how should that be handled?
Good question, Jean, and I know a lot of people have been wondering that, so I'm glad we have a chance to answer it. So as you saw when Tim was going through the first example of the day use permits, that you could choose how many people you wanted to have, adults and children. So because our group size limit in the wilderness is 12, one person with a recreation.gov account can make a reservation for up to 12 people on that day of hiking. So my reservation account, I could make a reservation for me and 11 of my closest friends to go and hike from the Devil's Lake Trailhead or wherever else you find availability or that you really want to get out to.
Thanks. And this next question might be for Jason or it might be for you, Lisa, but it was, there were two questions that were kind of similar. It was around why did we see such an increase in use beginning in 2011? And then what was the rate of increase from 2016 kind of up to 2016? So because Jason, the way it was presented is from 1991 to that time. So if you can answer that question.
Sure, I think there's a few moving parts on this one. So I'll give it a stab and Jason can fill in the pieces that I miss if that works for you, Jason.
Perfect.
So we'd started to see steadily increasing use. And so as someone who's worked in public lands, public service for a while, we used to talk about the backpacker magazine effect. So every year, some of the outdoors magazines would do a special feature on a backpacking route or a great hike or a cool campsite. And land managers would go, okay, we're going to get slammed next year. That's where everybody's going to go. So enter Facebook, enter Instagram, 2010 for Instagram. That was a big one that helped in the social media sphere of, really just sharing that information quickly. Here's this beautiful spot. Here's this amazing hike. Look where I got to go. And it really changed the landscape of how people learned about these places. So those were two parts and pieces of what led to, increase in visitation at many sites. I think we also saw increase in population in Central Oregon. Increase in just Central Oregon as a destination in these wilderness areas and backpacking and day hiking as a more and more popular activity. And so we started to see this sort of steady uptick. That has increased steadily over the past couple of years. And just in this last year or so that we've all been living our lives a little bit differently, we've seen exponential increases in outdoor recreation and backpacking and hiking opportunities. I will say that on the National Forest System lands, we do an official survey every 5 years is the cycle. It's called National Visitor Use Monitoring. We did a round in 2013 and we did a round in 2018. Our next round is 2023. So we'll see what the numbers tell us. But in 2013, across the forest, we had about 3 million visitors. In 2018, that number rose to 5 million. And then with everybody's response to the current pandemic, we saw 30 to 40% increase year over year in visitation. So that gives you a sense of some of the numbers and some of the perspective. Jason, what did I miss?
I think that you nailed a lot of it there. I know there's a question there about what happened with use after like 2016, and there's some context, In 2014, we had about 45,000 visitors to like the Three Sisters Wilderness. In 2015, it went to 90,000. In 2016, it was almost 132, 133,000. I forget the exact numbers. So we had some really dramatic increases in use. And so in 2017, we had the fires, like Millie Fire, Nash Fire. I can't remember. These fire seasons kind of blend together for me sometimes. And we actually closed some of the wilderness areas down. So if you were to graph it out, you would see that 2017, we had a big plummet, but we also had in July and August, most of these wilderness areas were closed to the public. And then in 2018, 2019, we still had kind of flatlining, but if you imagine flatlining, we went from 45,000 to 132,000, and we're kind of planning off right there. And then last year, I was like Lisa was saying, we did not have permits last year at all, even the free self-issue permits. And that was a decision we made to protect our employees for public safety. But just, with the anecdotal evidence we saw out there, with the amount of people, with the trailheads, we know use probably even increased beyond levels of 2016, 2018, 2019. So that's, did we answer everybody's questions there? Maybe I went on a tangent.
Yeah, no, I think that answered that. Jason, this may be something you can answer, or maybe Lisa. Any discussion of installing a solar composting outhouse at Green Lakes?
So we've been talking about composting toilets for a while, and one of the main problems with them is it takes money, it takes time to not only install them, but maintain them and to helicopter waste out of there, etc. And some of the national parks up in Washington spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars helicoptering human waste out of the backcountry. Our goal and our hope is that once we reduce some of these numbers of people in the backcountry, that will help alleviate some of the human waste issues and problems that we're having in some of these areas. We're still monitoring it. We're not throwing it off the window. We're not throwing it off the table. It's just something that we don't want to make that next step, especially with wilderness values. That is a structure in wilderness that we're really trying to avoid at all costs. That's kind of a last ditch effort. Lisa, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you said it well. It's a pretty high impact piece in terms of being able to manage that and maintaining and making sure that they work. When they work, they're great. When they don't work, they're not great. And it is a big lift. So we'd like to do everything in our power to manage human waste without having to install a toilet.
Specifically, these high elevation areas, there's a ton of research that shows that nothing breaks down very fast at all. And so we're just left with a big pile of human waste that we have to extract.
Okay, thanks, Jason and Lisa. Lisa, a person wants to hike the PCT going through Oregon. How does she know how to get a permit if she doesn't know when she's going to get to the Central Cascades area?
That's a great question. And I know a lot of through hikers or long distance hikers have the same concern. So we have had a lot of conversations with the Pacific Crest Trail Association and the managers of the PCT up and down the length of the trail. If you get one of the PCT long distance permits, whether you're doing a full through hike or whether you're getting one of their 500 mile or more permits that you can get through the Pacific Crest Trail Association, then you do not also have to get a Central Cascades Wilderness permit. If you're just doing, I shouldn't say just, because a 200-mile hike is still a pretty massive endeavor. But if you're doing a section hike that's shorter than 500 miles, you will need to coordinate for entry into the complex of wildernesses covered under this permit system. That's one of the reasons why we retain some 7-day before and even day of permit availability as best we can in this first year of the system, so that people could have a little more flexibility leading up to it, because you can get your permit from your smartphone. You can see, I'm planning to get there. I know the window roughly I'm planning to get there. And in theory, you could get a permit when you're a couple of days out. We also know that we're going to learn a lot this year, what people's travel patterns are and how this system actually meets the needs of such a diverse group of users, because we're all hiking and backpacking and enjoying the wilderness area, but we all have very different styles and needs and how this is going to work for people. We know that there's going to be some adjustments this year, but hopefully that those options that are currently available will meet people's needs for their planning, for their trip planning purposes.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, and I know this doesn't directly relate to that situation that was presented, but one of the things about this permit system is getting people to plan ahead, getting on recreation.gov, maybe picking a time or a place that is less popular, so you can enjoy the wilderness, but also just kind of plan ahead for your own good experience. The next question I'm a family of 6 and we like to visit Todd Lake multiple times during the summer. What would happen? And I think I answered in the chat the thing about Todd Lake, and Tim also responded to it. But I think this end of the question is a good question. What would happen if I bought an overnight pass for 14 days for $6 rather than day use passes?
Sorry for the dog barking in the background there. The joys of Zoom. That question has come up in a few different forms. And so in theory, that is something you could do, assuming that you're not talking about going to Todd Lake, as Tim described, that Todd Lake and the boardwalk around it is not in wilderness, so that's not part of the permit system. If you have a particular hankering to visit one site every day for 14 days, and essentially you're trying to get around the permit system, the way that we've set it up to try to help manage day use and overnight use for those 2 different reasons that Jason described early on. If you run into a wilderness ranger, they'll have some questions for you. There's nothing in the system when you go through recreation.gov that will flag you or point it out to us that you're trying to do that workaround, but it's not something it's something that we hope to not see people doing. It's really not the intention of how we want to manage these places and this system. So I know that there are concerns with people who want to hike with larger groups, have extended families, and potentially struggle with day use fees. We do want to point out that 19 of the 79 trailheads fall under this day use permit fee within the time frame, so the Memorial Day through the end of September, last Friday in September. Outside of those time frames, the system doesn't apply, so there's a little bit of a window for people to access these areas without the permit fee. There are also 60 trailheads that don't fall into the permit system for day use only. So there are actually a lot of options. And what I'd encourage people to do is go to Todd Lake with the area that's not within the wilderness, make a couple of choices, maybe to take advantage of the permit system and hike on those trails that are near and dear to your heart, and explore somewhere that isn't part of the permit system if you're looking for options to both manage a budget and work within different family or friend groups.
Thanks, Lisa. So the next question is, how much does it cost to administer the permit system each year? I don't know. At least, I'm not sure how we would answer that, being that, yeah. But go ahead. See what you can do.
I'll see what I can do with that one. That's a big challenge. So I'll leave it open for Jason and Tim to weigh in. So there's a couple of parts and pieces of this. One is the recreation.gov system, and that's what those fees that are charged when you go onto the website or when you call them, that's what those fees are going for. The recreation.gov system is the mandatory system for federal agencies, particularly the Forest Service. That's the system we are required by law to use for administering this type of permit system. They're under contract to the federal government, and it's been a case for a number of years now. And so all of those fees that are generated go straight back to the coffers of recreation.gov. We don't know yet because we don't know how many people are going to be participating in the system, getting permits and tickets. I'm hopeful that we'll get some better information as the season and the years go on. On our side, on the Forest Service side, Jason described our staffing. We have seasonal employees, we have interns, we have tons of volunteers, and we have a pretty limited crew of Forest Service staff that manage not just this permit system, but the wilderness system in general. So whether that's dealing with fires in wilderness, or doing trail work, or doing management of invasive species, or doing classic wilderness patrol. There's 2 separate pieces there, and we don't have a good answer yet in terms of a dollar amount of what recreation.gov costs to use for the system for the year. I hope that comes close to answering the question as best we can with the information that we have.
I'm just going to answer a question that's come up a couple times in the chat, which is about which trails are affected. And when Paige sends out the FAQs, you will see all the trails and all the quotas for those trails. So you will be getting that information. Excuse me. So Lisa, next question. Excuse me. Has there been any thought, or will there be, to helping climbers gain access to peaks that are really only accessible by a number of these trails that now have limited access? Above 8,500 feet, the heavy foot traffic is not there, but the needed access to the peaks starts way lower.
We had questions, either this specific question, quite frankly, or a number of other questions from people who use the trails in these wilderness areas to access various opportunities, whether it's climbing a peak or accessing a specific lake or getting to a particular viewpoint for photography or going to a place that's special and meaningful to them. We landed on, essentially, we tried to treat everyone equally. So whether you're a climber or a trail runner or a backpacker, we set up the system so everybody has the same base opportunity to get a permit, whether it's a day use permit or an overnight permit. We also tried to set up the advanced planning system, and then really went back and forth quite a bit on what's the ideal window to then release those closer in permit systems, knowing that climbers really keep an eye on the weather. And people who are planning various longer trips really have to coordinate around work schedules and other things. So we tried to build in as much flexibility as we could, while at the same time keeping the playing field as level as we could for all the different people who want to access these areas. And again, depending on if you're doing a day trip or an overnight trip, there are a lot of options. And we tried to maintain a good balance of levels of access into different areas. So if you can't get your favorite permit, your favorite access point, there might be one, a few miles down the road by car, which might mean a shorter or a longer access route. And we're going to have to see how this plays out in the first year and over time. That's part of our adaptive management, is to really look forward to hearing from different types of users on how the system worked for them, and see what kind of adjustments or adaptations we might have the chance to make so that we can better serve the public that wants access to these places, while at the same time protecting the resource.
Okay, so and maybe Tim can answer this one, or whoever. Just another clarification on how the 7-day rolling window works. I think it's important to highlight to folks that that rolling window will start actually when the season opens on May 28th. Mm-hmm. So Tim, if you want to go into that.
Right, so that window gives you an additional of that close near quota that becomes available 7 days out from the previous day. So since our system starts on May 28th, it does go live on the 21st for that. The system will be open for reservations, but that's when you'll start seeing that close near quota become available for the 7-day window. But if you're looking more, say, to summertime, and it is something like it's August 1st, then you're going to see things come open for August 7th. With that additional quota rolling in every single day, and that'll be going through the whole season. But one item to note, I think I saw this somewhere in the chat, is that it doesn't accumulate. So it's not like, oh, there was 22 day use passes that weren't taken, now the next day it's going to be added on. It's just that daily amount of quota that will become available. So it doesn't compound.
Great. Because we're coming down with 7 minutes, so I'm going to ask a couple of the questions that a lot of people have seemingly been asking in the past. So Lisa, if you start on a non-permitted trailhead, Lisa or Jason, if you start on a non-permitted trailhead like off Highway 58 and backpack into a permitted area, maybe along the PCT to Sisters Mere, for example, do you need a permit or not?
Yes. And maybe not. but mostly yes. So let me try to clarify, because I know that's a question a number of people have had. If you're planning to be overnight in one of these 3 wilderness areas, you do need one of the limited entry permits through this system. If you're planning to enter one of the trailheads for day use, one of the 60 trailheads that's not under the day use permit system that's managed through recreation.gov, that's limited entry, then you can get a self-issued permit at the trailhead, just like we've been managing since the early 90s. So you roll up to a trailhead, the south end of the Three Sisters, and you want to go for a day hike, and it's not part of the reservation system. You fill out your trailhead permit with the stubby little pencil, and you put the slot in the, you put half of it in the slot in the box at the trailhead, and you carry the other half with you. If, however, you're planning an overnight trip, all of the trailheads in the Three Sisters, Mount Washington, and Mount Jefferson wilderness areas require an overnight use permit through this system. I hope that I answered the right question correctly. Jason or Tim, was there anything that you would like to clarify?
Okay, I'm going to just quickly move on to a couple of things. Jason, if you would address this one. Since the wilderness was set aside for the use and enjoyment of the public, why is your view that the public is the problem? And I think that goes back to what you were talking about with the Wilderness Act and our responsibilities under the Act.
So I think that basically goes back to we have been, what the Wilderness Act tells us, we need to preserve these areas for future generations. And with the amount of impacts that are happening out there, the resource damage, I have 2 small children, and if in 10 years, if use keeps going like this, it's gonna be a different place out there. And I want them to see these pristine areas like I have seen them. And so we're not trying to push the public out. What we're trying to do is to maintain these areas so that the public has access to them, so that they can be maintained for future generations. That's my quick answer. Lisa probably has a much better way of saying that.
No, I think you said that nicely, Jason. I also think that people often, we become attached to these really amazing places, and the way that we experience them most often is going there. Although there's certainly a lot of value in sort of just knowing that they're there. Maybe there's a lot of places in the world that that you'd love to see, but that aren't realistic. And there's some value in just knowing that these places are out there and protected. But I also just want to mention that as part of our charge to protect and enhance wilderness character, that wilderness areas are also intended to be managed for other purposes. So for scientific purposes and educational purposes, as well as for recreational purposes, for historic purposes. And so there's a suite of what they're called the public purposes of wilderness. And so we're not just managing for recreational opportunities, we're trying to manage for the whole. And what that does is gives us a picture of the character of the wilderness that we're charged with protecting.
Yeah, I think if people read the Wilderness Act and our responsibilities under it, there's a pretty good answer right in the Act. Jason, if you wouldn't mind looking in the chat and answering, there's quite a few questions there that you might be able to answer quickly, just so we can get more. Oh.
I see.
Somebody wants to see the dog. Tim, is there a specific time of day that the rolling permits become available? And I'm going to throw another one at you, Tim, real quickly, which is, are there any situations where refunds are available, such as wilderness closures?
We do run into a large scale closure where we as the Forest Service initiate a large blanket closure, say with a wildfire instance, rebel, insert wildfire here. There will be an automatic process that if your reservation has not already occurred, it will go through the rec.gov system. It's all automated. It'll generate a communication to you stating that as such. And the rolling window, it functions more under an 8-day algorithm. So it works more of like a 7-day, 59 minutes, 59 seconds. So if you're looking to be that nitty gritty person, that's the additional scoop on that system.
Okay. sorry, I'm just going back and forth between these things, trying to get as many answers as possible. We've got 1 minute left. Let me see. I guess we should answer, this is a common question. How will this permit system be enforced and managed?
Good question. So we're starting with education, and that's part of what we're doing here today, is trying to make sure everyone has really clear, good information. We've been doing this a lot with our partners, with outdoor stores where people get their information, trying to build up as much awareness as we can so that people aren't surprised by it. We have a cadre of interns and volunteers who are also helping us in the field and at trailheads, making sure people know that there's a permit system. And, if you run into someone at the trailhead and you surprise them with, hey, do you have your permit with you? Pulling out a smartphone where we have self-service and seeing if we can facilitate people getting permits on the spot so that people can be compliant. Most people want to be compliant and we want to help them get there. At the same time, if we run into people who are willfully and repeatedly just trying to ignore the system or get around the system, we do have enforcement options that include our forest protection officers and our law enforcement side of things that can issue citations for essentially choosing not to follow what is one of the Forest Service regulations. We don't like to go there. We know that most people come to this with good intent because they're wanting to be outside. They're wanting to do something positive for themselves, with their friends, with their family, and get that wilderness experience. So based on our past rollout of things like this, I think we'll see really good compliance overall. We know that there'll be a learning curve and some challenges as people get used to the system and people learn about the system. But I think we have a lot of people with really positive intent who really want to see these places protected, and we'll work that out.
All right, there are some questions about the reservation fee. Do you still need to pay for the reservation fee if you get the permit the day of? Yes, it's a straightforward processing fee that goes to recreation.gov. It doesn't come to the Forest Service, and there's really no other way around it. Again, it's $1 per day per person and $6 per trip for overnight use. One person said, please explain that an overnight permit must be used on the first day of the permit. Some people seem to think that they could get a 14-day permit and start hiking on any day in that 14-day window. Lisa, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, some people have asked that question, and because we're managing, so Jason referred earlier to our need, quite frankly, our need to manage in different areas, so especially those popular areas with the number of appropriate campsites, both for water quality protection, wildlife habitat, human waste management. Those overnight permits are intended to help us manage the number of people who are entering the wilderness from one corridor at any given time. So if people don't stay consistent with the trips that they booked, that really can throw the system out of whack, where we have a bunch of people landing in the same place and time that's inconsistent with what the reservation system is telling us. That really it makes it harder to manage effectively. It makes it harder for us to understand how the system is working and not working, and it makes it harder on the resource if people don't stay consistent with the permits and the trips that they actually book.
All right. So when will we know if the Mount Jefferson Wilderness will even be open? Should I make a reservation now? Tim, do you want to talk about what goes into the knowledge piece of the recreation.gov?
Sure. So right now there is no quota available at the launch of the system, so you will not be able to make a reservation on any of those trailheads because they are still listed as closure from the Lion's Head fire, and that will remain so until we get a clear and go ahead that it is safe to re-enter that area. At that time, we will send out a communication stating with leeway, with advance, letting you know that the system will go back online so that you can access it and make those reservations.
Great, thank you. So Tim, I'm just going to explain the 7-day rolling window. So there seems to be a lot of confusion about it. So every day new permits become available, and you can make a reservation for any of those permits up to from that 7-day time frame. So every day in the summer, once the season opens, new permits will become available for a 7-day period from that date. So that way is how we're letting room for spontaneity versus you can also make advanced season reservations at any time as well. So if there's permits that are 3 months out that are available to you, you can do that if they're available, or you can do the 7-day rolling window because you just decided that you wanted to go this weekend or next Tuesday. I hope that helps.
I'll just throw in, Jean, that the permits will stay available until they're full up. So if on, I'm not sure what July 17th is, but if on Tuesday, July 17th or whatever that is, you think, oh, I'd like to try a hike this weekend, you can go and see if there's any permits still available for Saturday or Sunday at the trailhead of your choice. And at that point, the 7-day rolling window will have opened up. So there will be additional availability beyond this first April batch. And so it's essentially every single day, some more permits will open up a week out, and you can look ahead and plan your trips.
Jason, I'm going to send this question to you, and just a little context to it. Overall, how few people will be allowed into these trailheads? How many people will be denied based on last known use? So can you talk a little bit about how we didn't go back in time to find these numbers and talk about how these numbers were developed? Thanks.
So we did not go back from numbers from 2016 and then regress to like, hey, we want it to be in 1995 again. That is not what we did. We took basically the numbers from 2016, even though that was our biggest year, and we tried to adjust that so that we had these trailheads so people could access these trailheads along the same numbers, but dispersed spatially and temporally, if that makes sense. So there's still a lot of use that can be done out there. But what we're really doing is cutting off some of those big days like at South Sister and Green Lakes, where we had 500 people on the trailhead at that day, and really ratcheting those big, July 4th weekends down and trying to move that use to other places. So people are always asking me, well, can I still hike to Green Lakes? I'm like, you have to be able to hike to Green Lakes. It's going to be very difficult to hike to Green Lakes on July 4th when everyone else is trying to go there as well. So you just have to maybe plan a little bit more and be a little bit more flexible. Does that answer the question?
So Jason, thank you. And we are trying to get to as many questions as possible. Lisa, don't we have a budget to administer the permit system? Can you just talk about the budget in general and maybe hit upon how valuable our volunteers are to us?
Sure. Try to think of how to frame my answer to that question. So we don't get a separate budget for wilderness management or for permit management or for really most of the things that we take care of in the Forest Service. So as a multiple use land management agency, the forest unit gets a budget that then is spread out among all of the program areas. The wilderness program falls underneath the recreation heritage lands partnerships program, and I'm the staff officer for that group. And so our budget covers the seasonals and the permanent staff for that whole suite of programs. Wilderness is one subset. We don't have a separate budget for managing the permit system. What we have is an organization chart that sets out how many positions we are able to hold and to fill to manage the wilderness program. And out of that wilderness program, the wilderness permit piece is one thing that we manage. So we rely a lot on our interns through our partners, Discover Your Forest, and our intern program to do a lot of the work on the ground. That wilderness patrol, the cleanup, the trash collection. We have a small cadre of seasonal wilderness rangers who are Forest Service employees who are bolstered by these wilderness interns who do all of the permit system admin work in terms of checking people's permits on the ground or in the field, who do all the cleanup, all of the burying of human waste that isn't properly disposed of, all the pickup of the trash and the disposal of waste in campfire rings, that sorts of things. But we wouldn't be able to make this wilderness management that we have happen without the volunteers. So volunteers for our wilderness program, they do trail work, they do campsite work, they do restoration work, they do visitor services, assistance, education, information, they do safety patrols, they do pretty much anything you could imagine for the wilderness program, all with a fairly skeleton Forest Service crew. So Jason is our wilderness program lead. Tim, that you've also met tonight, is our permit lead, and he's shared with the Willamette National Forest. And then we have a handful of wilderness trail crew, and we have a wilderness volunteer coordinator. That's our wilderness staffing, and they do an amazing job. So we couldn't do it without the volunteers that help make it happen. And that's how the program is put together in terms of structure and the working parts. Did I get close to an answer, Jean?
Yeah, I think, one thing just to recognize is that the vast majority, 80% or more of our trails work is done through our volunteer program. And just recognizing that, our budgets are limited. And if it wasn't for the great help of our volunteers and partners, we really wouldn't be able to provide what we do provide to the public. So please thank a volunteer if you see them. Tim just put in the chat kind of an account, sorry, it's getting a long day, email that you can send your questions in. So you're not alone. If we leave this presentation and we haven't gotten your specific question answered, I know there's some people who have some specific trips planned. Please reach out to us. Any one of us can be reached. Paige has all of our information, and we will try to get to those, sorry, that's my dog, specific questions as we can, but we're here to help you. And there's lots of information on the links and the information that we will be sending out. So just want to make sure people know we're not going to just abandon you after this.
Yes, we know that this is something new, and we know that there are lots of very specific, I have this situation, what can I do questions that are coming through the chat. So we just want to say thank you so much to our panelists for trying to answer some of the broad ones. Don't forget, we're going to send you all of the frequently asked questions in our follow-up email, as well as a recording of all of this. So if you do have a question that comes back up, reach out to us. We will connect you with all of our great panelists from today, and we will get you answers. Thank you so much, Tim, Jean, Jason, Lisa. This was a fantastic presentation. We are so grateful for your time, and we are going to go ahead and wrap it up so that everyone can take care of those dogs, maybe get some dinner. So thank you everyone for attending. We are going to hopefully see you again. Check out DeschutesLibrary.org for all of our great, fun, free presentations. And of course, don't forget that survey. It's very important. We want to know what you want to see coming to you next at your Deschutes Public Library. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. We'll see you again soon.